The fans out there, they want this fight at light heavyweight. We have aging legends. We have a millionaire taking on a former title challenger, Philipe Lins, the monster. Well, he's the Monstro, taking on OSP, Ovince Saint Preux. And in this matchup, Matt, sing me a song, you're the piano man, is what the folks are saying.
I was thinking more like, oh, every time I close my eye. Do you think Philipe Lins is a big Bruno Mars fan after winning that $1 million?
I don't know. But what I do know is this is the third time that this friggin' fight has been matched up. So I'm going to tell you the story. At UFC 282, Alexander Gustafsson was supposed to take on Ovince Saint Preux. Ovince Saint Preux took to his OnlyFans. Let that set in. That dramatic pose. And then he said,
Pause?
Gustafsson, no, pose, I'm speaking French. Gustafsson is out of the matchup, Philipe Lins is in. Lins is then out, and then in steps Antonio Tricoli. Couldn't get a visa, so the UFC cut Tricoli. So
that's unfortunate.
Fat chance, bud, see you later. So in the matchup, Matt, they decided, hell, we'll just rebook it for a third time. The people have been asking for this, so now they get it. So for Philipe Lins, Matt, I'm going to throw up his Tapology page. It makes me sick to my stomach. Since he won that $1 million
50 Shades of Grey is what you'd call it.
by beating Cuddle Bear Copeland, he was supposed to fight Satoshi Ishii the next year. That falls out. Then he's supposed to fight Andrei Arlovsky. Then they rebooked that fight. I'm doing this from memory, folks, because we're not looking at it. Then he fights Arlovsky, who's a teammate, and loses. Then he fights Tanner Boser, and he loses. Then they rebook him with Ben Rothwell 3 times. That fight doesn't happen. And then it just snowballs from there. Now, Lins did fight Marcin Prachnio almost a year ago. It was about 10 months ago. And in that fight, he loses the first round because Prachnio strikes from the outside. And in round 2 and round 3, Lins decides to grapple, bring the complete package. Lins convincingly wins the second round and the third round. And it looked like the guy that we saw glimpses of when he was with the PFL. Now, he was Monstro with the PFL. He was damaging. He was finishing guys. And it was weird because for Lins, he had that PFL season at heavyweight. He had good career success at heavyweight. And he hadn't fought in the light heavyweight division since he lost to Kleber Silva and Vadim Nemkov back-to-back with Bellator 2015-2016. And I know that, like, Silva is what Silva is. But Nemkov, Bellator light heavyweight champ. So for Lins, it was weird. We didn't know what he was going to look like with the weight cut. Now we've kind of forced it over to Ovince Saint Preux. The guy's got 7 performance bonuses in the UFC and a fight of the night, if you can believe it. In the UFC, 14-11 since debuting in 2013 against Jean Vellante, 6-1 with Strikeforce. You might go, who'd he lose to with Strikeforce if he went 6-1? And I go, hey, just an MMA Hall of Famer, Gegard Mousasi. Like, dream. Any different organization, Strikeforce, UFC, Bellator, Gegard Mousasi's made an imprint. He's got a fingerprint there. But, Matt, with OSP, inconsistency, you never know what you're going to get. And not really the greatest run of his career now.
I think we do know what we're going to get, though, at this point. Now, it's unfortunate to say because I really enjoyed OSP, especially when he was in his prime. He's a unique fighter, right? He's like Chris Boucher of MMA. He throws head kicks and he's good at submissions. Like,
if
that's
Chris
a weird
Boucher throws a head kick in an NBA game,
but
he's getting in trouble.
Chris Boucher shoots threes and blocks shots and, like, looks like a weird spooky goblin man when he runs. Like, it doesn't make any sense. OSP also doesn't really make any sense as a fighter. Like, you wouldn't teach a fighter to fight like OSP, even though OSP has fought for a UFC interim title and did fairly well, all things considered, against John Jones. The problem is, that was all the way back at UFC 197.
The poster's here somewhere. I think it's back
there. That's
there.
what you guys have to get. That was almost 100 UFC events ago, so we're coming up on almost a decade since OSP had fought for a title. It's just been a really long time since OSP has been one of the relevant players in the division, and this is going to sound like a little bit of an autopsy of his resume a bit, but even when he was in his prime, he was never really able to beat those top 3, top 4, top 5 guys. He was always a very difficult fight for anybody outside of the very elite of the elite, but go back to OSP. He fought Glover Teixeira, wasn't able to beat him. He struggled
that was a fight of the night.
Struggled with Ryan Bader. I just mean the top guys in the division, even when he was in his prime, he did struggle with some of those guys, but think about his after title fight, sort of career resurgence. Knocked out Corey Anderson. He was looking really good there for a while. I just think that at this stage of his career, he's lost one of the few things that made him kind of unique, and that's the output. Even in the Shogun fight, we talked about this a lot. Hey, Shogun might have a chance. He didn't look completely terrible against OSP, but the problem was OSP wasn't really throwing that much back at Shogun. So I just worry about how much OSP is going to be able to throw in terms of volume and damaging strikes against Lin.
So first thing, you said OSP struggling against top 5 competition. Well, guess what? He's fighting Philipe Lins.
Well,
not a top 5 fighter.
But the point is, OSP's almost 40 years old at this point of his career.
Second part of this, OSP fought Shogun twice, so it's worth kind of the denotation. So the first time was in May main event in Brazil.
He skipped on it.
Uberlandia,
It was
and
in
he knocked
Japan.
him out. What?
It was in Japan.
No, it was in Brazil.
Okay.
Knocked him out in that matchup. So OSP wins that fight. And then in the rematch, Matt, the fans booed.
It's one of the worst fights of all time.
The second round, the third round, the later stages of the first round, it was one of the worst fights you're going to see. So, Matt, I mean, for OSP, it's been a weird run. For Philipe Lins, he can grind on the majority of the fighters that he takes on. The trouble is, can he grind against a guy who gets his back up against the fence behind the black line and find a ton of success in this fight? I guess that's the biggest question.
Probably, because he's just there to be hit. That's my issue with OSP at this stage of his career. He doesn't really move left to right all that well, and I think for those reasons he is going to struggle. Because again, if he did have that great lateral movement, he can catch Lins walking into some of his shots. Remember what Jamall Hill did to OSP? Like, OSP was trying to set up what he used to do.
He did it to Menafield not that long
Exactly.
ago.
Put my back to the cage, be awkward, move in a strange manner, and make him make a mistake. I just don't think OSP at 205 either is the best decision. And I know that's weird because Lins is the heavyweight moving down, but even with OSP, like when he weighs in for his heavyweight fights, he's like 240. He's not a guy who just doesn't cut weight. Like, I really do think OSP has to get into a really good shape to get down to 205, and I'm just curious how much that affects him at 39 years of age. Because again, with his style, he needs good cardio, he needs good output, and he has to be able to put a lot behind his shots even late in fights. Again, go back to the Corey Anderson fight. I know he had hurt Anderson in the first round and the second round, but he probably still lost both those rounds just due to his lack of output. But again, he's got that great checkmate with some of his kicks. So maybe if OSP can implement his kicks, but the problem is we don't really see him go to the body or the head as much with that technique anymore. And that was one of his best shots for a long time.
So Lynn's open minus 130. He's a minus 230 favorite now. OSP open plus 110, plus 185. We have a look at the Tapology votes. Matt, surprised us there to you. I'm going to say over under 67.5% Lynn's.
I'll say over because they've been pretty one-sided lately.
Oh, they're under. So 462 total votes, 59% Lynn, 67% by decision for the 41% that have OSP, 50% by decision, 18% by submission, 24% by knockout. Those aren't perfect numbers. Matt, Philipe Lins and all the black lines of fights that have fallen out, all the not medically cleared to compete stuff, weirds me out, and I hate his cut to 205 even more than I hate the cut for OSP. I hate that it takes away from his chin. I hate that he had to resort to not that I hate it, I actually like it out of his style, but he grapple, grimy, grind type of style, round 2, round 3, and that usually would show it against a guy like OSP, but I look like OSP for the jiu-jitsu. Now I'm struggling with my grasp of the English language, and I do like the counter shots out of OSP in the matchup. I'm taking Ovince Saint Preux against my better judgment as a pretty big underdog now, and I think Saint Preux is going to go out there and kind of shock the world for just one more time.
I just think unless he gets to stop it, it's going to be really difficult to go out there and win a decision. On the back foot, Lins is a guy who will be aggressive, at least in this matchup with his high guard. I think for those reasons, it's going to leave a good imprint on the judges, and that's why I do have Philipe Lins. Now again, the winner of this isn't going to go on to then fight Volkan Oezdemir or anybody really high up in this division.
We hope not.
But it should be a fun fight for as long as it lasts. Again, if this fight is fought at like its highest level, we should have Philipe Lins walking forward, throwing good boxing combinations, going for an odd takedown here and there, and OSP throwing good counter shots off the back foot. So hopefully that's the fight that we get.
Big time matchup, light heavyweight division. I'm going OSP, you're going Monstro. We have a big time card with 6 debuting fighters, including a guy with 3.9 million Instagram followers, Khusein Askhabov, putting that undefeated record up against pretty boy Jamall Emmers. Should be a great fight. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.